experience and wisdom of the seniors with the enthusiasm of the juniors. Some of what I'm going to be saying relates to, especially to ISKCON in the first world, the developed world, known as the established free market democracies, because that's actually where ISKCON began. That was its strongest base during Prabhupada's time. But I don't want you to think that none of this will apply if you're from the second or third world. I remember a statement that I never forgot by the ever-quotable Badrinarayan Prabhu. In the 90s, one exuberant devotee from a booming second world country wrote that, North America, USA, they're really just, they've lost the plot. This kind there just has to go through, slog through the mud, whereas in our country, things are just going through the roof. So Badrinarayan Prabhu very respectfully replied to him, appreciate your enthusiasm, but while you're driving, look in the rearview mirror. Check out what's coming behind you as you emerge from the pioneering phase. So I always remember that. So let's keep that in mind when we compare the exuberant pioneering phase of many parts in second and third world ISKCON with what we'd have to say for the most part, speaking in general, is a slowdown in certain areas, certain preaching areas of the first world. Let's talk now about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and innovation. We can begin by referring to the end of Srila Prabhupada's famous Vyasa Puja poem. Oldest of all, but in new dress, miracle done, His divine grace. Now what exactly did Srila Prabhupada mean by oldest of all, but in new dress? He was not referring to clothes. He was referring to the whole outreach packaging of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And as Prabhupada himself explains his own poem, he says that Vyasa Puja means glorifying the Guru because he is saying the same thing as Srila Vyasadeva. Not that, well, that was thousands of years ago that Vyasadeva compiled Srimad Bhagavatam, therefore we have to change the message. No. Same thing. Now what exactly does that same thing mean? It would be very interesting to discuss that in terms of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. This morning you heard from His Holiness Bhakti True Maharaj telling you how Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur arranged that the British governor of Bengal would come to Mayapur. Now you can just imagine, even these days to come to Mayapur, up that road, is different. But just think, 80 years ago. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur pulled this off. And what happened when the British governor got to Mayapur? Bhakti Chamarji kindly left that out so that I would have something to talk about. Saraswati Thakur arranged that professional caterers would serve the British governor meat. And then he was discussing with his leading disciples about that, and His Holiness B.R. Sridhar Maharaj, question. I hear that you're saying we should also consider doing things like this, radical things like this, in preaching in the foreign countries, overseas, in the West. Wouldn't that lead us open to criticism? And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's reply was, I've already decided about these things thousands of births ago. We have to do anything and everything to carry out the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, besides his arranging professional caterers, not the devotees, to provide meat for the British governor, because those were the British ways, meaning it, he had a German scholar visit him, and he told the devotees, supply him cigarettes. In terms of the outreach of the Gaudiya Math under the direction of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, they seized upon every contemporary technological opportunity. In other words, they didn't simply bring the mission of Lord Chaitanya into the modern age, they seized the cutting edge of the modern age. Radio is one example. Traditionally, sadhus, when radio first came out, like the internet was maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, radio was the cutting edge. But the sadhus were looking askance at it, thinking, oh, this is Maya, very complicated, not for Vaishnava. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's disciples immediately seized upon the radio and started making radio broadcasts of lectures. In fact, the historical records show that before one broadcast of a lecture, they made a traditional kirtan with traditional instruments and a piano. Their publishing went through the roof. Not only weekly magazines, but also a daily newspaper. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur didn't simply have one printing press, he had several. And they were churning out such literature. And in the literature, they took care to show that Gaudiya Vaishnavism was not just something locked up in a box of traditional religious concerns. They took great pains to show that Lord Chaitanya's message could address the whole world and all its problems. So therefore, they had a series of articles entitled The Gaudiya Math and Politics, The Gaudiya Math and Eugenics, The Gaudiya Math and Law, The Gaudiya Math and Trade, Commerce, The Gaudiya Math and Science, The Gaudiya Math and the caste system. In this way, under Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's direction, they were determined to show the connection of bhakti to all phases of life. And this was something unprecedented in terms of the scale that it was done on and the consummate erudition and brilliance by which it was done. Let's go to entertainment now. There was a problem at the time in Mayapur in that a rival camp was still claiming that a place across the river was Mahaprabhu's birth site for commercial reasons. And you know how Bhaktivinoda Thakur established the real birthplace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But people were still being lured across the river. So what did Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur do? He hired professional theater artists to perform pop sentimental religious dramas to attract the people from across the river. But he forbade his disciples to watch the dramas. This is a theme that you'll see throughout the history of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's innovations. Very strict about bhakti standards with his followers, but in terms of appealing to the general public, willing to do so many things which these days in ISKCON we would probably feel quite uncomfortable with according to our understanding these days. So it was not simply that he would hire professional theater groups to perform these sentimental religious plays. When it came time for big holy day celebrations in Calcutta, especially when they had the magnificent temple of Bhag Bazaar, in order to get the people to come, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would line the road from the river to the temple with professional entertainers. So that the people would be attracted. Let's go on up the road. Look at this on this side. Listen to this on that side. And they keep going up the road, and they would get to the temple gate. That's where it stopped. Once they entered the temple gate, pure bhakti. Next, let's talk about the Mayapur exposition. This covered more than a square mile. It's like a fair or exposition on a scale that even today we would be quite amazed. A square mile? So what went on at this Mayapur exposition? They had two sections, spiritual and material. So the secular part demonstrated all kinds of ordinary human endeavors, but the best human endeavors in terms of medicine, education, agriculture, the arts, handicrafts, animals, childcare, athletics, amusements, gymnastics, wrestling, boxing, sword and stick fighting, martial arts, music competitions, dramas, film shows, and a circus. The Gaudiya publication referred to these as innocent amusements. Prizes, medals, certificates were awarded to the best performers and exhibits. So that was the secular side of this fair of exposition that covered more than a square mile. The spiritual side was very interesting. It had a complete panorama of India's spiritual culture, whether pure Vaishnava or not. There were exhibits by all sorts of pseudo-Vaishnava sects. There were presentations by basically anyone and anything who claimed to be spiritual in India. There were books from all kinds of religious groups, relics of paraphernalia from sadhus of all kinds of callings, all kinds of paths. There were, of course, dioramas. These dioramas were such a huge attraction at that time. And there was a huge map of India laid out on the ground, covering an acre. And the map was composed of bricks and stones, color-coded, and on this huge map of India laid out on the ground, you could trace the pilgrimage routes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda throughout India. And then also were the locations of all the 63 Gaudiya Math temples. So this is the huge scale that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's organization and disciples operated on. One other thing about this extraordinary exposition that covered a square mile, it was all brilliantly lit by electricity, which back in those days, in the early 20th century, to have a square mile exposition illuminated by electricity, this was the talk of the nation. Because electricity was, in such a rural area, was such an unusual thing. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's brilliance seized upon all these innovations in order to impress people that Lord Chaitanya's message was completely profound and serious and worthy of attention from competent and educated persons. So then, for VIPs, the temple in Calcutta could arrange luxury cruises on the temple's cruise boat up the Ganga. And while these VIPs were being brought up the Ganga on a luxury cruise, the devotees would present Krishna Katha to them. We heard this morning from Bhakti Chu Maharaj about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's use of English. He wanted to out-British the British. But always notice that the message was never changed. He was very strict about presenting the message of the parampara. Sometimes even, as Prabhupada explained, his own disciples were a little nervous about the power of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's presentation. I'll give Prabhupada's own presentation of the reaction to his Guru Maharaj. Some of my godbrothers described Guru Maharaj's technique as the chopping technique. And they were afraid to bring big donors to him because they had spent so much time cultivating these donors, and then they were afraid we bring them before Guru Maharaj and we don't know what's going to happen. And unfortunately, some of them even became critical, and Prabhupada himself said they fell down. So there was this extraordinary power in presentation, the might of the message of Lord Chaitanya. Then there was this academic brilliance with the scholars, in which he out-Britished the British scholars. There was also such affectionate dealings with his disciples, and you could consider that to be innovative. The historical records show that sometimes he would personally supervise and participate in the prasad distribution to his disciples. When relatives of his disciples would visit their sons who were living in the mandir, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would spend so much time talking to the relatives. So in this way, besides the Singha Guru, there's another side also. And right before he left this world, he spoke to his disciples that, actually, I don't have any disciples. You are all my gurus, and I've learned something from all of you. So as His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj was explaining the other day, Srila Prabhupada's statement that you're all representatives of my Guru Maharaj. So this is the parampara. This is the devotee care. The devotee care attitude coming down through parampara. Let us consider the environment that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had to deal with. Let's do a quick environmental scan. Because in order to do outreach, you have to be aware of the environment, taking into account some factors, but also one may decide that regardless of those external factors, we're pushing ahead our way. So, during the time of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, everyone's mind was filled with thoughts of independence from Britain. This was the predominating reality that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had to deal with. Everyone who was intelligent, intellectual, or even the ordinary person on the street was thinking how to get these British out. So this affected Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's outreach, because the best brains were all caught up in politics. And to give you an example of how this was such a major phenomenon, the person who Srila Prabhupada credits with driving the British out of India, Netaji, he actually came to see Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to complain. Why are you taking all these young men with such talent? They're all meant for independence. They're meant for politics. That's how significant were the efforts of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in getting the best of India and organizing them. The politicians, they took note. How can you do this? And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was very firm that there's no higher priority than Lord Chaitanya's message. And of course, when our Srila Prabhupada met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that was Srila Prabhupada's presentation. Like, how can anyone take seriously the message of Lord Chaitanya about India is dependent? And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, of course, told him that bhakti is so important, it can't wait for anything. So this was part of the environment at the time. Another part of the environment, we heard also a bit this morning about the caste brahmanas. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, his policies of ignoring the caste system, sometimes even produced violent outbreaks. So every mission of Lord Chaitanya always has the environment to deal with. So the question is, how much do you take into account? And how much do you just say, damn the torpedoes, full steam ahead? We saw that when it came to politics in India, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur just went on recruiting the best. When we saw about, for example, preaching to British academics, all right, I'll speak a language that shows them who they should respect. I'll out-British the British with the language. So in some ways, you tune into the environment and make adjustments. In other ways, you hold the line. And this is an important point as we consider ISKCON today. I'd like to present some quotations from Srila Prabhupada about how devotees respond to the environment around them, the social setting. In our seminar that we're trying to present about ISKCON crises and challenges in the first world, we go into this in depth. But let me leave you with two statements. Srila Prabhupada said that an expert business person knows how to make a profit, whether the price of the commodity is going up or down. In other words, a neophyte business person can only make a profit when the price of something is rising. But if you're truly expert and you know your business, you make a profit no matter which way the price is going. She said, similarly, devotees in all circumstances know how to spread Krishna consciousness. At our seminar, I'll be speaking about major changes in the first world since Prabhupada's presence, and how we may or may not be in tune with that or even aware of it. Another statement by Srila Prabhupada, one that I relish very much, is his definition of management. He said that management means to create attraction for Krishna where there is none. That is management. Very deep and profound statement. When we look at the current situation in ISKCON, we see that, especially in the first world, we need to reassess our environment and see if we are poised to reach out to the entire population. Or should we just be content with treating very nicely a certain segment of the population, which is very pious, very fortunate? In other words, the low-lying fruit. In so many, I travel all over the world in every continent. And throughout the first world, indeed, the blessed and fortunate Indian congregation has saved so many temples. They're the low-lying fruit because of their piety, their good fortune. And certainly that low-lying fruit is very juicy. But now, it's more than time enough for us to advance to higher branches of the tree, to fruit that is more difficult to obtain. But yet, the job must be done. I'm finished. So, I recall a statement that Bhakti True Maharaj makes often to his disciples to encourage him to preach to the wider world. And you have to understand his statement in context. If you're just preaching to Indians, you're not preaching. Of course, understand what he means. He's saying, come on, let's open up and go for higher fruit on the tree. Let's not just focus on the low-lying fruit, which is very juicy, auspicious, pious, and blessed. But let's move on from here. Let's open up and show that Lord Chaitanya's message is meant for the whole world. So that is a point that I'll try to address in my attempt at a seminar I'm giving. And let us remember Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's the picture of him given by Srila Prabhupada. The picture of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's contribution. Oldest of all, but in new dress, miracle done, his divine grace. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki